want to ask a poll question while we're waiting for other people to join in. We're going to pop that up right now. But the question we want to ask is, how much does it cost you whenever you have a piece of equipment go down? What does that cost your operation, your project, in terms of man hours, in terms of just falling behind, or what you have to do to get caught up? What's the average expense look like for you if you calculate everything into there? So giving folks another minute to join us, and we'll pop that question up in a couple slides. We'll pop the responses up in a couple slides. If you're just now joining us, you can see that poll question, and we're going to kick it off now. So what we want to cover today on our agenda for today is talking about preventing downtime. If we could go to the next slide, we'll put up, there's our agenda. We're going to talk about starting and deep cycle and AGM batteries, and we're going to talk about how to get the most out of those batteries through testing, charging, equalization, watering. We're going to talk a little bit about solar applications, and we're going to talk about working with your rental customers. Now, we know on this call, we've got all sorts of customers and non-customers. You're welcome to attend if you're not an Interstate customer, but we know you could be the end user of these batteries in your own equipment or using them for the company you work for. You could be renting them out to customers. So when we say your customers, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're going to take a slide or two to talk about that in the end. But first, let me introduce our hosts. There's probably no two people that know more about batteries on this planet than Gale, Kimbrough, and Jeff Barron. Between the two of them, they have almost a century of automotive and battery experience, including owning their own shops, turning wrenches. That picture of Jeff at the bottom is him working in our state-of-the-art laboratory. I mean, there's not a more advanced lab than that, I believe. So Jeff and Gale, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate y'all allowing us to be on.
Yeah, and I'm Kyle Friedel. I'm the one. My job here is basically to ask the stupid questions so the folks in the audience don't have to.
No stupid questions.
Yeah. So it looks like from our poll, the 43% of respondents were in the $250 to $500 range. So we're gonna, with another quarter below that and another quarter above that, we're gonna say $500 for an hour of downtime. So
a bunch of money.
Yeah, a lot of money. We'll come back to that later, though. Jeff, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, you got it. Hey, thanks guys for having us on. And we're gonna cover a lot of batteries. Probably dozens of different applications, maybe even hundreds of applications. But what it all comes down is basically the fundamentals of how you're taking care of the batteries, whether it's an 8D or a 6-volt golf cart battery. We're covering the fundamentals so that way you guys understand how these things are going to operate, what works best to make them, perform and basically get some life out of them. But all this is going to also fall back on your manufacturing specifications as well. Gale, you want to jump in on some of it?
Sure. One of the things that people hear the terminology of an SLI battery, and remember that that's a starting, lighting, and ignition battery. That's what you start the vehicle with. And we know that most vehicles are going to give a short duration, 2 to 3, 5 seconds maybe. And one of the things that we want to remember is that starting batteries should not be used for cycling batteries, and cycling batteries should not be used for starting batteries. That also that in this situation, as an example, when you go to start a vehicle, typically you're only using 2 to 3% of its actual capacity or capability. But with cycling or deep cycle battery, you're using that all day to power some accessory equipment, and that's going down as much as 25, 50% of the battery's capacity. So make sure you're using the correct battery for the correct application. That's so important because that can lead to that downtime situation that we were talking about if you use the incorrect one.
Yeah, and you want to look at cranking amps for your starting batteries or cold cranking amps if you're in a colder climate. But cold cranking amps in a hot climate can actually be a shorter life. Isn't that right?
That's exactly right, because to build a higher co-cranking amps within a confined battery area, a box, if you will, we have to place more plates inside to increase that co-cranking amp and so capability. So when we put more lead in that, obviously it displaces the water, the cooling capability. So in a hotter climate, it can't keep itself as cool. And so in cold cranking amps, higher co-cranking amps are not necessarily great for hot climates.
All right, cool. And Jeff, talk us through cycling batteries.
So cycling batteries are a lot different than what you're dealing with on a starting capacity. So when we look at deep cycle or motive or traction batteries, whatever you want to call them, so these are a lot lower discharge rate, and we talk 25 amps, 50 amps, maybe 100. So what we look at is a lot lower amperage for a longer drawn out period of time. And your typical deep cycle product is only going to have an ampere hour rating on it. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. So we've always talked about, and especially with the flooded or even AGM product, we always look at 50% depth of discharge. Well, why would we say 50% depth of discharge? Well, as we talk about the charging aspects later on in the Proclinic here, we're going to kind of fill you in on what that means and how the cycle life is compared to it. We also look at what we call the reserve capacity, and that's, you've got reserve capacity on your CCA batteries, and that's typically listed as emergency power. And that emergency power is going to get you somewhere safe if you were to have an alternator failure or have a belt break. But now on today's vehicles, if you got a belt that breaks, well, guess what? You've taken out the water pump and everything else. So we still list that as reserve capacity as emergency power to get you somewhere safe.
On a starting battery.
Exactly.
But on a cycling battery, that's your storage of power.
Oh yeah, that's your storage power for 25 amps or 75 amps or even up to 20 or 100 ampere hour ratings.
Basically, if you don't have a generator or alternator.
Exactly, to be able to take care of it.
Okay.
And as Gale was talking earlier, and I'll let him kind of chime in here as well, higher CCAs are going to mean a lower reserve capacity because, as Gale alluded, you've got to stack a lot of plates in there to get a high CCA value.
Yeah.
Yes, and to make that reserve capacity in the manufacturing, you have to make a thicker plate or wider plate. So you don't, with thinner plates for CCA and packing it full, you don't have space to make it wider for extra reserve capacity. So when it gets to too high of a CCA, you lose reserve.
Exactly.
Okay. And these are typically lead acid batteries, but yeah. let's talk about AGM batteries. Those have been around for quite a while now, but they still seem to be a bit of a mystery. How do these apply in the equipment arena here?
So when you're looking at AGM product, of course, AGM stands for absorbed glass mat. Now we all start out with a lead grid. From there we get paste material that's put on for either the negative or for the positive, whether it's PbO2 or whether it's sponge lead. In between these positive negative plates, we're going to have an AGM material. It's an absorbed glass mat material. So we actually incorporate sulfuric acid and water just like we would for a flooded battery. However, when this gets pressure inserted in there, it actually absorbs into that glass mat. So now we've got dynamic power as soon as we add that fluid into it. So they're excellent for starting. They also are really good at cycling because of the compression that's actually within them. There is a difference in performance when you're looking at a pure lead product or an alloy. Pure lead product is basically, it's virgin lead that's come from the lead mine. It doesn't have any impurities in it, so it gets built straight into the battery itself. Alloy is recycled lead or reclaimed lead. So these are the batteries that you take back in for cores. These batteries get sent back to a smelter, and from there they get disassembled, and then they go through a recycle process. It doesn't eliminate all of the impurities that are actually in that battery where, you basically cause it to fail. So you cannot get all that out of there. So that's why we have an alloyed versus a pure lead.
So that's the difference between an expensive AGM and a really expensive AGM.
Exactly. And, when you look at the cycle life comparison, they are expensive, but you can also get almost 2 times the life. Now that is, you need to take care of the batteries. That's how you make them last.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And
yes,
vibration resistance is huge with this crowd, right?
Yes. you know, because most of y'all are dealing with a lot of vibration out there on these pieces of equipment. So keep in mind, lower internal resistance, because you've also got all these that are actually pressure inserted in there. So the vibration resistance is a lot higher. We are doing fantastic to where these things can sit on those different platforms and vibrate for 8, 12, 16, 24 hours, and they're still going to perform.
Yeah.
But with that said, Kyle, I know you're getting ready to throw this up. Overcharging can kill these batteries very quickly. So make sure you got the right charging ratio in there. We'll talk about charging as we get down through these Proclinic slides.
Yeah, we're going to go into charging. Now we're going to talk about connections, different series and parallel connections. You know, most of the people on this webinar are probably pretty familiar with this, but talk about this and why it matters. Jeff,
Well, I'm loving how we do this. This is so much fun. So when we look at these two batteries here on your left, now these are 12-volt batteries. Now what we've done, we've actually done a series connection where we go on positive of one battery to the negative of the other battery. And so these open connections that we have here now, we've actually made this into a 24-volt system. Now, keep in mind, when you put batteries in series, you increase the voltage. You do not increase the capacity. So in this case here, we got 24 volts, and each battery is going to produce 500 CCAs or 120 reserve capacity. Well, that's what we end up with, 500 CCA, 120 reserve. Our battery over on the right-hand side, we've actually put these batteries in a parallel. So what that means is negative of one battery to negative of the other, and positive of one to positive of the other. So what we've done here is initially kept this as a 12-volt system. However, we've doubled the capacity. Now, we'll talk about this as we get down through these other slides, but do not mix capacity ratings of batteries in a parallel connection, or even in a series for that fact.
Okay.
So here we've got 500 CCA each one, 120 on the reserve. So now we end up with 1,000 CCA, 240 reserve capacity minutes.
All right. And let's talk about when you do both series and parallel connection in the next.
Parallel. So this is one that we really stress to you folks that are actually doing installs or swapping out batteries that have already been in there. Draw out how these batteries are actually connected, or take a picture with your phone. Picture's worth 1,000 words, and that can also save you about $1,000 or more. So when you're looking at connections, this picture here on the left, we've got 4 6-volt batteries. Well, we've got series and parallel together here. So now we've got these batteries connected to where it's a 12-volt system, and each battery is going to produce 225 ampere hours. But essentially, we've only got 2 banks of batteries here that are 12 volts. So now we've got a 12-volt system, but we've increased that capacity times 2 because of the series parallel. So now we're 450 ampere hours total. Our picture here on the right is dealing with CCA and reserve capacity in a 24-volt system. So once again, we've taken 2 12-volt batteries and we series those together to get 24 volts, and we've incorporated another pack the same way. So we went from 12 volts to a 24 volt, and now we paralleled that together where we're a 24 volt system, 1,000 CCA or 240 reserve capacity in minutes. So make sure if you are replacing product or installing new product, get you a drawing, make sure that you're hooking up everything correctly, so that way you don't end up with a high dollar repair bill on something that you oopsed on.
Yeah. And guys, I know we're going through this a little bit quick, but we're going to have some technical schematics of multiple different types of connections that'll be available to you after the webinar. You're going to get a survey, 5 questions. That's all we ask. If you fill that out, one of them is, do you want a copy of the schematics, or do you want a copy of this presentation? So you can tell us in that survey if you'd like to have a copy of these connections plus several others. So with that said, let's jump to our next section of this. And this is about getting the most out of batteries, right? That was basics of batteries and connections. Now let's talk about getting the most out of them. So at this point, we do have we talked about another poll question for you, if you pop that up. We talked about the cost of battery failure. Now we want to know, how often in a month, in any given, say the average month, do you have battery failure, or is downtime related to battery failure? So we'll give you guys a minute to fill that out.
Dun, 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 dun,
Dum,
dun,
dum, dum, dum. And at the end of it, you can hit the bell, Jeff. Dum, 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 dum. Yeah, we are starting to have too much fun.
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
And again, guys, I remind everybody, please put questions or topics that you'd like to see covered in future webinars. Put that in the Q&A, or yeah, put that in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we customize this. I know there's at least 2 people on this call that I've reached out to personally to ask really what they wanted to know, and crafted a lot of this based on some emails with them. But so, okay, here we're looking at a pretty even split, but let's, more than 2, less than 2. Let's say it's twice a month times $500. That's expensive. That's $12,000 a year related to battery failure. So it's important that we talk about how we could get the most out of these batteries. So first, let's do this little battery math. Like at Interstate, we want you to buy fewer batteries, not lesser ones. And what we mean by that is we want you to buy exactly the amount of batteries that you need, not more, not less. And so we may have a more expensive battery, but we believe that's going to last longer because of the way we take care of it before you even receive it. So we'll go into that in the next coming slides. But if you looked at, a 1 year battery, a battery that's meant to last for 1 year, and we want you to consider this over a period of time. We want to look at the cost to your operation, not the cost of a battery. That's short-sighted, and we it's understandable. You see a sales guy come in and you say, I want the cheapest battery. But if you look at this, basically a 1 year battery over 6 years, you're going to have to replace, if you've got enough equipment in your operation to have 100 batteries running at any given time. 1 year battery, you're going to have to basically buy 600 batteries over that 6 years. And that times 100 is $60,000 you spend on that. And you can see how a better battery, a 2 year battery, that continues to go down. The more you're spending here, the less your overall battery program costs you. And so how are you going to get a 3 year battery? It's hard to get that. So we're going to talk about some maintenance best practices. But you might want to spend a little more for features, like added, Jeff, what is it we have that keeps vibration control of the plates? It's at the bottom of the EFB batteries.
We call it the mud rest.
The mud rest, yes. Yeah, I get to ask the dumb questions. So even if you spent $175 versus $100 for a battery to get those features that make it go that 2-3 years, you're still saving money. On a $75 greater expense on that one battery is still a $2,500 savings. Not even considering reduced preventative maintenance, reduced downtime. We just talked about that on this call. We've got an average of $12,000 a year in downtime due to batteries. So look at it as a total savings to your battery program. So that said, buying the right battery, getting the right specs that you need for your application. It's not necessarily AGM, but working with your battery provider to know what is really best for what you're running out there. And then, understanding when your provider brings you those batteries that you're getting the freshest stock. So Gale, take us into that on just knowing that the batteries that you're receiving are as good as they can be or as fresh as they can be.
It is. Thank you. It's very, very important, guys, when you think about getting a fresh battery, making sure that you have the freshest battery that you can get, because sitting on the shelf somewhere in the warehouse, that battery is aging and losing power and reliability. So we want to make sure that we buy the freshest battery. At the middle there, you see an H9, and I want to identify that H9. I've been around batteries for a long period of time, and I know that's August of 2019. But in this situation, look at the top there, and you would see that we at Interstate go through A through L as the first letter meaning what month it is, and the 9 obviously meaning the year. And so that's our way of identifying fresh batteries. We have those on. Otherwise, some people use a sticker, and as you see at the bottom, and it says, okay, it's 816. identifying what month and what year. Very, very, I can't stress this too much. It's very, very important for you to get the most out of your batteries by getting the freshest battery. As I've mentioned many times, when you go to the grocery store and your wife sends you in there to get some milk, the first thing that you do is reach there, try to go toward the back and get the freshest milk because you know it's going to deteriorate. And so this battery sitting in a warehouse for long periods of time, a year or more, could be a deterioration factor on that battery, and you're losing in utilizing that battery on your vehicle.
Yeah, and we want to also, one thing about those little circle date stickers, like that doesn't, you want to understand what your manufacturer or your provider uses those for. Some people come in and they put a date sticker on there saying they came in and they tested it every 3 months or something. That's not good enough. With Interstate batteries, and you see a round dot sticker like that, talk to us a little bit about what that means, Gale or Jeff, or I guess
Yes.
Jeff. Or
absolutely. One of the things that Interstate is noted for and put together many years ago and has been so great at it, and that's taking that battery when it sits on the shelf too long and taking it away from your shelf and replenishing it with a fresh one, taking it back to our warehouses where we know how to recharge batteries effectively. Once you take that battery and recharge that effectively, oftentimes we'll put a sticker like the bottom one saying when the last date was that was recharged. And again, Interstate knows batteries. That's all we do is batteries. And so that's part of our name and our devotion, if you will, to what we do. And so making sure that we know how to recharge batteries effectively and bring them back to a full state of charge with that, making sure it's the freshest battery you can get and the longest life.
Yeah. So Jeff, talk to us about that reconditioning, recharging, what we call rotates.
Yeah, so we call that the rotation process. And so what we do there is we make sure that our the route drivers that are coming to see the guys that are on this call that actually have route drivers coming through from Interstate, we have them monitor that inventory. So every time that they go in, they're actually looking at the product itself and looking at date dots. So if there's a product in there, and we typically do 3 to 4 months on rotation process. So if they see that battery is older than 3 months, well, then they're going to bring it back and they're going to charge it. And the picture that we're showing here is as a battery sits there, it self-discharges. And what that means is that fluid that's in the battery that everyone calls battery acid, it's a combination of sulfuric acid and water, roughly 75% water, 25% sulfuric acid. The specific gravity ratio of water is 1.000. On specific gravity on the sulfuric acid, it's 1.840. So sulfuric acid's heavier than water. As it sits there in non-use, it separates from the water. As it drops to the bottom of the battery, it migrates into the plates. So all these little white crystal spots that you see in there, that's sulfation that's actually building up on the plates because it's not forcing the acid back out of the plates by doing a charge. So that's why we go in and we monitor the dates on the product itself. We bring it back to the warehouse and we charge it to force all of these little crystals back out of this paste material. So that sulfation creates resistance. As you guys know, in resistance factors, that creates heat. Well, we don't want to heat the battery up to actually kill it. So we want to make sure we get that sulfation built out of the plates before it gets to the point where it's actually killing the product.
All right. And at the end of sorry, go ahead, Jeff. You're on a roll.
Hey, I'm on a roll.
1-year-old rotated battery.
So this was actually a product that we do what we call 365-day flat stands here in the lab. Well, what's that mean? So what we do is we take a SKU of batteries and we'll actually charge some every 3 months. And then we'll actually have product that we don't charge at all through 365 days. We know what 365 days is. That's 1 year. So we look at those products and we'll actually the one that you saw before this was one that we actually let set for a year. So that sulfation was already through. So when we looked at this plate after charging it, rotating it, every 3 months, this is what the finished product looked like after a year. So the white spots on the other one, not charged to force that sulfuric acid out. This one, as you can see, there's just minute spots in there that actually have a little bit of sulfation. So the process that we do makes sure that we are getting that battery back up to a full state of charge. So that way the performance is there. Not that we want that battery to stay in your shop for a year or even in our warehouse for a year. We want to make sure that our product is out there and being sold, in a timely manner. But let's say this thing were to sit for a year. Well, we're not going to use it as a new battery anymore. So what we're going to do from that prospect is we're going to make it into what we call an econo. All right.
Yeah.
So that's a cheaper product, still good product, but it's not the top of the line that we would actually offer.
So we pulled it out of consignment after a year, but it's still talking
Yes.
about the results of that test.
It's still going to function, but we're going to sell it at a discounted rate. Why it didn't get sold, we have no idea. But
the if you look at the results here, this is still in the parameters of a new battery.
Yes, exactly. So you're looking at 1276 on the voltage side. And this specific gravities, this is one thing that really we focus a lot here on the lab, because we want to see the gravities up. And of course, these look really good at 1280 across the board, up even to 1290. So that's what we look at. And when we do teardowns here, which we do a lot of teardowns, we look at the individual cell voltage, because inside a battery, there's 6 cells in a 12-volt battery, and each cell should produce 2.14 volts or higher. And so that's what we look for when we take the top off the battery. We kind of call it giving it a haircut. And we'll look at the individual cells inside the product just to kind of see how good we're looking.
All right, cool. Well, I'm being told we need to speed this up a little bit. So
Who's telling you that?
Hey,
the man behind the curtain, the woman behind the curtain, actually.
Yeah. Gale, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, or add to, one of the things to remember for those guys out there in the equipment industry is that the alternator will not desulfate that battery.
Exactly.
It has to be recharged by someone that knows what they're doing on the right charger.
Okay. Well, let's jump into testing real quick, and then we'll get over to charging right after that. Just because.
All right, Gale, you're on this one, buddy.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Hey, we talk about testing because that becomes an intricate part of what you're doing on a daily basis. You want to know if that battery is good or bad or just ugly. And so in this situation, you see the pulse, which is a conductance tester that you can test starting batteries by. It does not test deep cycle batteries. So those of you that are out there in the industry that are using 6-volt batteries in your lifts and different things, this pulse does not test deep cycle batteries. Conductance in a deep cycle battery is totally different than conductance in a starting battery, because it's manufactured differently and totally different resistance factors. One of the things that you see for deep cycle batteries is a discharge machine, making sure that it can be set for, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I think, about discharge machines, but making sure that it's charged up correctly and to 100% is very important, and making sure that you test it correctly. If it is a starting battery, you can use that conductance tester to test that battery and make sure that it gives you a reliable CCA value, and compare that to what its rating is, a measured of that conductance tester versus a rated.
Yeah, I think we just need to advance the slide a couple. There you go. Okay.
There you go.
So we've got conductance for starting batteries, discharge machines for cycling batteries, and the IB Pulse is something that we've got featured there. That's our new tester for Interstate customers. That is now in the process of being able to test full packs. We're not promoting it as such yet because we're still doing quality assurance testing on it, but that is going to be available for every Interstate dealer in the next couple months to be able to pack test without having to break down the pack.
Yes, it is. We just went through some of that already in our lab a few weeks ago, but it's still in the process of coming out.
Yeah. Cool. And if you do find a bad battery in that pack, what do you do?
Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah. One of the things that you're going to talk about, Jeff, is never putting an old battery with a new battery, correct?
That's exactly right. We definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah.
If you're within a year, that's probably okay. If there's a bad battery, you could put a new one in there and kind of live it out. But if you got batteries in there that are 2 or 3 years old and you got one that's really showing its age and not working, replace the whole pack, please.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
Okay.
exactly right. That's going to bring it down to they're going to bring that new battery down to the old battery's level of capacities.
Let's do that. We've got a little video of Jeff doing a pack test, just for those that aren't familiar with the
Right, so I'm
process.
doing a pack test here for the bank of 4 batteries. I've got my positive hooked up over here. I've got my negative hooked up over here on the last battery. So we've got one large battery is what we're basically testing this as. And I set the CCA value at 3,000 for the total. Well, I came in a little shy of that at 2161, which says replace the battery. So is it one of the batteries that's creating the issue, or is it 2, or what is it? So we'll need to check this out and break the pack down to do a complete test on it.
Yeah, so you break it down, find the offending battery, and then you can even go into the individual cells and check the specific gravity with the hydrometer, right?
Yeah, keep in mind that not all batteries are accessible. So
Yeah.
if you don't see any ports on there like you can pull off, don't try to break the top.
Yeah. Please don't do that. All right. Let's talk to a little bit about charging on deep cycle.
Yes. So when we look at deep cycle batteries, when we talk about cycling, one cycle is considered one discharge and one recharge. And when we look at deep cycle batteries, you've got a break-in period that we need to make sure that you're educating your customers out there on. Deep cycle batteries have to have a break-in period anywhere from 25 to 50 cycles before they will actually come up to their full capacity. So make sure they understand it. They're still green. So they need to be cycled, no pun intended on, interstate green. But they've got to be broke in to be able to perform to their peak performance. So when you're testing new batteries, you can get a false reading. And especially if you're talking automotive side where you're trying to use a conductance tester, that can actually give you some really false readings there. So we don't want to test new product. Your total cycling capability is based off of the application and the requirements and how many cycles you're going down and how depth of discharge you're going. 50, 70, 100% depth of discharge. Well, guess what? 50% is what we recommend. When you start getting down to 100% depth of discharge, you're basically cutting the cycle life in half. So make sure that you're doing the due diligence on your product itself to make them last. Every time you use this battery, even if it's for 30 or 40 minutes, charge it up. The charger is only going to give the batteries what they need, and they're only going to take what they need. So we call it opportunity charging. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we look at on our side of making the batteries really, really last.
Okay. One of the questions we had from a previous audience actually was, how do you recommend testing deep cycle batteries? Do you want to go into that with the...
Yes. So what we recommend is a discharge machine, because when you're using like a carbon pile load tester, I mean, that's a dynamic hit, yes, but it's for 15 seconds. That's not going to tell you how long this battery is going to perform at 25 amps. So there's discharge machines that are out there. We have several that we offer through Quick Charge, but I mean, there's several other manufacturers out there that do that. Make sure that you're getting a quality discharge machine if you're looking for that aspect of it, because that's going to tell you exactly how much power availability you've got within this product. Now, these things are discharge machines. They're not chargers. So once you discharge it, you're going to have to charge it back up. So make sure that you're using the correct machine to do this and the correct charger to charge it back up with. Yeah, and then once again, educate your customers about break-in.
Yeah. So if you're working with an Interstate distributor, they can order Quick Charge. Quick Charge is the brand discharge machine. So, all right, let's jump into how charging happens in stages. Gale, you want to take that on?
Yes, as we look at this graph, we're looking at various stages. a multi-stage charger is very important because it means that it's a smart charger, smart enough to know when it needs to go to the next stage. In this situation, we have a bulk stage. It's pouring in a lot of power to try to replenish that battery, but at the same time, you need to go through an absorption stage. Once it gets to a certain voltage and stays at that, and then we go to an absorption stage, and then we have to finish it off. And you can tell that the finish stage may take as much as 10 to 20% of the battery's capacity back into consideration to finish that off. The float stage, which is the last one you see on the right, is primarily keeping that it's maintaining the battery at whatever level it is. If you don't go through all the stages correctly and you just go to a float stage small charger that goes into a float, I want to make sure that you understand that it will not recharge the battery effectively. It's going to use a maintenance stage or a float stage. If that battery's at 70%, guess what? It's going to keep the battery right around that 70%, not recharge it, just maintain it.
All right. And talk to us a little bit about charging profiles and what we're looking for.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what we look at on the charging profiles here is basically the bulk, absorption, float, and equalization, like Gale was just referring to. And so we could break this down into, your 20 ampere hour ratings to where we're looking at 10 to 13% back through. And then when it tapers off into the absorption stage, it's dropping it down even less. So we've kind of got this broke out on the different voltage regulations, and you can find this on our website as well for your 6 volt, 12 volt, 24, 48. So this can kind of give you a baseline on what you're looking at as far as the different settings or regulations that you need. Now, keep in mind, this is all based off of 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 C. So with that, there's going to be different variations, especially as you're looking at different temperatures. A lot of the chargers have temperature compensation built in off of the connectors. And we will talk about that if you have one like that, or if you're able to dial it in on your charge controller.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about adjusting for temperature in a minute.
Yeah.
One of the questions we always get is to talk a little bit more about solar charging and how solar can help us keep those batteries going.
Yes, solar has really taken off here in the last few years, because number one, it's free once you buy all the components that go with it, but it's free. The sun's free. So what we look at is your 6 volt, 12 volt, and 24 volt applications and what kind of amps that you're going to be able to use to charge batteries back up. And it's all going to depend on what size panels that you are purchasing. Now, I noticed the picture down here on the right on that case unit where it's got that little bitty charge panel. That's probably not enough, and especially if there are 8D batteries in there. Mm-hmm. So we look at, and a lot of these solar folks work off of what we call wattage. So wattage divided by the voltage is going to kind of give you the amps that you're going to be able to get when you're in full sun. So our example on here for a 200 watt panel on a 12 volt system, you're roughly about 16.66 amps. How we get all that is 200 divided by 12 equals 16.6. Now, you do have panels that are 200 watts that'll actually put out a lot more. It just depends on the crystallines that are actually built within these panels themselves. If we look at a 200 watt panel for a 24 volt system, well, we're dropping the amperage now. So now we're down to 8.33 because we divide that over 24 volts. So that's where we get that 8.33 coming in. Some panels will do more than that, but you also have to look at that as the ratio that you're going to be getting back in.
I think he's got that panel there to charge his phone.
Is that what?
I don't know.
That's it.
And I like how in the top picture, they're using that light to power the solar panels, to power the light, to power the solar. It's amazing. No. And Gale, we were going to cover, we did have questions about watering. Like that's a big question on maintenance. So jump into that if you would, Gale.
Yes, one of the things to remember is that watering a battery may or may not be necessary because there are more and more batteries coming out and manufactured today that do not need or cannot have or do not have accessibility to add any. However, because they've improved the water evaporation. But water evaporation is not a bad thing, as it says at the top. But heat, the higher the heat, the more heat, the more evaporation, water evaporation. Then, so make sure if you have accessibility on your batteries, check those to see, and there are certain specifications depending on the manufacturer for adding water, but make sure too that you add only distilled water or deionized water in for this type of operation. Because as you add various other things, you're going to input or add chemicals to that that can destroy the battery. So that's very important. Make sure that you top up the cells 1/2 inch above the plate level, but do not overfill, because if you overfill that to the top, you will lose more water. And do not add additives. Many years ago, there were batteries that had situations where you could add this certain oil to the top of the battery, and it would sit on top of the battery, on top of the electrolyte, and that's not good. That's not a good scenario.
That's mineral oil.
Yes, the old mineral oil thing, that where you would add that to the top of the battery, and they would even sell little bottles of it, and not a good thing. There've been many tests conducted on those in our labs and various other labs around the United States, and that has been proven that it's not a good thing. Additives are not a good thing, and like mineral oil and or well water, different things like that. So
Yeah, we've heard what, Gale, mud puddle water, you get out there, please don't do that.
Yeah.
We've heard of, I hate to say this, but we've even had groups that we've talked to that actually put urine in it. Please don't do that.
Believe me, that's a bad additive.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we need the battery to evaporate to reduce the heat is kind of the point.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we're going to jump into another quick video Jeff made of the right way and the wrong way to hook up your batteries for charging.
Okay, folks, let's talk about how to hook up these batteries to charge them efficiently. So we've got 4 group size 31 batteries here that we've actually got connected in parallel. So all of your positive cables are hooked together for the positive terminals. And we've got all of our negative cables connected to the negative terminal on all 4 batteries. So let's discuss how we're actually going to charge these batteries to make it efficient. Now I've taken the negative charger lead and I've hooked it onto, let's say this is battery number 4. So I've hooked up the negative lead to battery number 4, and I've actually attached the positive charging cable to, let's say this is battery number 1. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 batteries connected in parallel, and now my charger is going to see this as one big battery and charge all 4 batteries at the same time. Now let's talk about the wrong way to hook up a charger. We've got a lot of folks that will actually hook the charger up like this, where you've got the positive on battery number 1 and the negative on battery number 1. Now you got 3 other batteries that this thing is going to have to try to fill up. This is the incorrect way.
All right.
That was almost like the Blair Witch movie.
I probably could have edited or shot that a little better. That I apologize to everybody that's a little seasick out there right now. But thank you again. Great video work. Great voiceover, at least, Jeff.
There you go.
So we gotta go faster. Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Let's talk about this real quick. This was one that was new to me, but talk about battery equalization. Gale, can you take this one?
Sure. Battery equalization is a charge where you saw it on one of the charts earlier about battery equalization. When you have a situation where if you're checking specific gravity and your specific gravities are off by 10 to 15 points difference, that's when you might, or when you have some manufacturers that say on deep cycle batteries especially, that you need to equalize every 4 to 6 weeks. So make sure though that you go by manufacturer specifications. Another situation that you need to make sure of is if it's an AGM battery, AGMs typically do not require an equalization because they're different batteries. They're not liquid electrolyte. So make sure that, and do not remove the caps during equalization. Equalization is a higher recharge to try to equalize the individual cells, trying to take that white off of this battery plate that you see integrated there, trying to desulfate the battery. And so that's what battery equalization does. It controls that overcharge solution, those lead crystals, the white lead crystals, and increases capability of power and conductance in that situation.
All right. And another one that we had covered and is adjusting charging voltage for cold temperature. I mentioned earlier we would cover that. We've got a formula here that remember, if you fill out the survey afterwards, you can request a PDF of this presentation if you want to, or jot down this formula, let's take a screenshot, whatever. But essentially, you're adding some voltage to your charging. Jeff, talk about that and how do you add that voltage?
Yeah. So when you're looking at this, as far as the temperature compensation, as temperatures are going up, the batteries don't need to charge as high. So what it's going to do is compensate for that. And especially if you can plug it into your charge controller, you're able to actually put these numbers in there. So as it's either getting warmer, it'll actually drop the voltage down to where it's not over temping the product itself. As the temperatures are getting colder, and I like this picture that you got here because this was just Dallas, 3 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. So as temperatures get colder, batteries are kind of like me. I don't like to work in the cold. So neither do batteries. So as you're getting colder and colder and colder, you need to compensate for that. So you increase the voltage to actually come through that resistance factor. So these are simple formulas to be able to add into your charge controller if they're adequate to be able to do it, or if they're already in there, they're going to know the temperature of the battery. So the probe would go actually either on the post or it would be attached to the battery itself. Right. And so that will actually change the charging parameter as well.
All right. We're going to wrap up the maintenance part here. Let's talk our top 10 on maintenance. Jeff, you want to kick that off?
Let's go with number 10.
Number 10. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your post clean. That's in life and in batteries. So make sure, number 10, keep your battery post clean.
And number 9.
Number 9, accept only the precious stock for longevity and capability of capacity of your batteries.
And how about number 8?
Number 8, insist on true rotations, those that have been kept fresh during the time that they've been sitting on the shelf. Insist on a manufacturer that knows batteries and does that just specifically.
And how about number 7?
Number 7, keep them stored in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area when you're not utilizing those. Obviously, when it's very important for well-ventilated area and cool and dry.
And you don't have to use the board anymore underneath it. Ding, ding, ding.
No, in fact, as my daddy said, do not put that on concrete, son. That'll ruin the battery. And I said to him straight out, yes, sir. But that's not what is needed today because of all the changes in battery technology and our polypropylene cases, etc.
Awesome. And how about number 6?
Number 6, do not store discharged batteries. You want to make sure they're fully charged before you put them in storage. Like in certain areas of the United States where you have an inventory or a whole life, if you will, of cold weather, you don't want them setting in cold weather and discharged, and various bad things can happen. So make sure you do not store discharged batteries.
And number 5.
Number 5, know your battery's health. Test it. Test that battery every 6 to 8 weeks. Look to see if it needs recharging to make sure your health is kept up of the battery.
And number 4.
Number 4, keep those batteries charged up. Keep them limber. Very much like people, keep them exercised, keep them going. And understand the break-in time that some starting batteries do not need that much cycle life to get them up to 100%, but deep cycle batteries may need 25 to 50 cycles before they get into fully charged and full capacity.
And number 3.
Number 3, have your customers charge the batteries, what we call the opportunity charging. Anytime you have an opportunity, it doesn't have to go down to 0 state of charge. It doesn't have to go down shouldn't go down below 50% depth of discharge. Opportunity charging, when you have an opportunity, charge it.
And number 2.
Number two, water when necessary. If you have a battery that have batteries or utilize batteries that you need to check those, and water when necessary, make sure you go 1/2 inch above the plates. Not overcharge, not over water, but water when necessary.
And number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, number one, equalize. Do everything that you can that when you've got the batteries, make sure if your manufacturer says equalize these batteries every 4 to 6 weeks, do that. We want to keep you in the battery business, making sure these batteries last as long as you need those and work for you. That's what they're for.
Cool. Great job, guys. We are out of time, need to go to Q&A, but we're going to bounce 2 slides down real quick. Just, I wanted to spend more time talking about this, but we need to talk, just for those of you who rent equipment to customers, it's everything that you've learned here. You can share this webinar with them, helping them understand how much does their time cost? How much is it costing them if they're not maintaining this equipment? And if you add up your equipment costs and your labor costs, we talked about $12,000 a year. But here I've used a more conservative number, but still come up with $13,000 a year just in expenses. Not to even talk about the damage to your reputation and getting future jobs, things like that. So I'm sorry to have to zoom through this, but wanted to just touch on that. Just help your customers understand what it's costing them, and then offer solutions. Train them just like what we've talked about here. Send them this webinar link. Work with them to employ opportunity charging. That's using mobile chargers or onboard chargers like this quick charge. If they're coming in on the day shift, they need to have it charging at the end of that shift. If they're coming in on the night shift, they need to have it on, and ideally having like a sign in, sign out sheet. So how much it's been used and if it's been charged, things like that. So we're going to jump into Q&A now. And again, sorry for just whizzing through that, but just a reminder, if you fill out the survey that you'll get after this, you can, we'll send you a copy of this presentation as well as some more of these schematics.
Man, I think Kyle was saying we talked.
Whew! I was talking fast.
Yeah.
So questions. This is from Eric. He asks, how often should we recondition our 31 AGM7 batteries? We deplete our batteries in about 3 weeks before recharging them.
Oh my goodness. Well, the big question is, what are you doing to deplete it? And why are you waiting 3 weeks before you actually charge them? Because, batteries, as they sit there in a discharge state, even if it's a slight discharge, that sulfuric acid that's actually within the plates, even on an AGM, you're going to start sulfation. And what that does is it actually starts basically breaking away the real estate that you've got. So it starts dropping the real estate. So now your capacity is going to start dropping. It's best if it's going to get discharged, you recharge it right away. 3 weeks is a long time to wait.
That's going to be a really short cycle life.
Yes.
Right? That's what
that's an expensive battery, by the way.
Yeah, that's what we talked about damaging, about taking it, your average depth of discharge below 50%.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
If a battery has sat on a shelf for 2 years, can it be emptied and refilled?
No.
No, don't empty it, please.
All right.
So remember we talked about this earlier where it's sulfuric acid and water. Sulfuric acid's heavier than water. So as it separates from the water, it's like a sponge. The plates, the paste material is like sponge. So it absorbs all that sulfuric acid. Well, when it sits there long enough, it's like concrete. So as long as concrete's moving and rolling, it's not going to harden up. As soon as it sits there unused, it's going to harden up. So, putting new acid in there is not going to bring the battery to life.
Jeff, hey, Jeff, talk about what you have to do from getting rid of the acid in your lab.
So ours, we have to pay a company to get rid of it. You can't just dump it out on the ground. EPA will frown on that quite a bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you explain the term equalization and how often it should be done on a commercial battery?
Equalization, as Gale alluded to earlier, it's a ramped up overcharge. So when we say ramped up overcharge, typically when you're looking at an alternator charging, you're at what, 14.2, 14.4, depending on what vehicle and application. When we look at equalization, we're talking 16 plus volts, sometimes 16 and a half. So it's a ramped up, controlled overcharge. And when we say controlled, it's going to be amperage and voltage. Amperage is going to shoot it up to that voltage set point, and then it's basically what that does is hit the roof. So it'll hold that voltage and amperage tapers off. So what it's doing, as Gale alluded to earlier, it's basically breaking those crystals off and mixing it back up in with your sulfuric acid and water mixture.
And make sure you don't allow, during that equalization, allow your battery to get too hot, because that heat is not good in that situation.
You may smell rotten eggs. That's
Yes.
kind of a normal process. But if the battery's hot to the touch, you need to turn the charger off.
All right. This is probably a yes/no question. Will battery fluid, it's not a yes/no question. At what temperature will battery fluid completely freeze?
Batteries at 100% depth of discharge will freeze at about 32 degrees. If they're fully charged, minus 80 before they'll freeze.
All right. Thanks, Matt, for that one. Yeah, Matt had another one here. What is a good way to house or distribute distilled water? We use about 30 gallons or more a week in the summer in just one location.
Buy you a reverse osmosis machine.
Really?
Yes.
That's a lot cheaper, really.
That's a thing?
Yes.
All right. What?
Google that.
Okay. What is the cycle life of a GC2 ECL UTL at a 50% depth of discharge?
Over, let's see, I'm having to look back. It's actually over 500 cycles.
Yeah, I was thinking more in the 600 to 650 range, somewhere in that. We've tested a lot of those batteries in the lab, or Jeff has, and I did when I was there, and we found that at the temperature, we have it regulated obviously at 77 or 70 degrees, 21C, and so in that situation, we found cycle life to be in that range.
Yep.
Man, y'all are battery geeks. Let's see. What is the highest and lowest operating voltage range for an AGM battery?
Highest on our pure lead product is about 14.8 to 15. We don't really like it at 15. 14.8 is perfect because they work really well. The lowest you want to have is about, I don't know, Gale, what is it? 14.1 to
14.1
charge back up.
We have some trucking situations where they're running the alternator, and by the time it gets back to the batteries, it's only seeing 14.1, and that's at the very low side of where it needs to be for an AGM to function properly.
Yeah.
Continue.
So the longer the run to get to the batteries, the lower the voltage is going to be, and that's never good.
Cool. How do you maintain fluid levels on a deep cycle battery that doesn't have cells that are accessible? Asks Chris.
Well, if it's a maintenance free, you have no way of doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you shouldn't need to, right?
No, you shouldn't need to. If it's a maintenance free, like our EFB product, our enhanced flooded, there's no need to add water. The way that the formulation is built up on the plates and the grids, the use of water is very minimal throughout the cycle life.
Yeah.
It has special vent caps that are made to allow that vapor to go in and return back as water.
Yep.
Okay. Is it better to use a battery tender 24/7 or recharge periodically?
Well, I mean, it depends on whether you're going to be using that battery often or not. If this is just, let's just say it's for a sump pump. If it's just sitting there, everything likes to be exercised, whether it's, humans or a battery. They do like to be exercised. It's good to make sure that you do have a force or a push on the product itself, as long as it's actually keeping it up to a certain spec. So if you're looking at a product that is a maintainer, that let's say your product was at, as Gale alluded to earlier, 75% state of charge. If it's a maintainer, it's going to maintain 75% state of charge. It's never going to push it all the way up. So make sure you got a good automatic charger that does the maintenance. Some of these newer designs that have got a microprocessor board will actually monitor the battery over a 30-day period. At that 30 days, if it's not been moved, it'll actually go through what we call a rebulk. So it'll go through a 2-hour recharge and then go back into float mode again.
Yes. Some of those smart chargers are very intelligent to make sure you have on your equipment.
Okay.
For your battery.
Jessica asks, what should the amperage be for a charging station? I have a 5 amp. We have our school buses with 3 batteries, group 31, 65, and 78, anywhere from 600 CCA to 900 CCA. And they're using a Perky's Autometer 5 amp charger.
Well,
6
and
stations.
5 amps is kind of low, and especially if you're looking at a group size 31 and a 3 bank, that's kind of low. And especially if it's a bus, because they're going to be non-use for a while, you run into the situation, and especially that we've done a lot of data collection on, where a lot of these municipalities and school districts now actually have cameras, and they have GPSs on the buses. Well, there is a master disconnect switch, but if that person fails to turn it off, that 5 amps is not going to keep up with it. So these are the things you've got to kind of weigh out. How often does it get driven? How long does it sit? And what are the key off drains?
You're absolutely right. They might need to get back in touch with Bruce Perky or his son.
Yeah.
All right.
Do that.
And Corey said, speaking of a frozen battery, how would you recharge a battery which is frozen?
Here's the thing about a frozen battery, and we've seen this quite often, especially in the last 2 months. Remember, when water freezes, what does it do? It expands. So keep that in perspective when you're looking at a battery that is frozen, where you have all these positive and negative plates that are actually pushed together. When you start expansion, you start distorting the plates, and there's a high probability that you're going to have 2 things happen. You're going to have plates that touch, or you're going to have a strap that gets twisted. And if you go to try to start charging that, guess what can happen? Well, you've created a direct short. And what Gale has always said is we call that a rapid disassembly. These things come apart very quick. If you've ever had one blow up on you, you'll know what I'm talking about. 9 times out of 10, you have to go home and change your shorts. So we want to steer clear of that. If you know the battery has frozen, please don't try to charge it. You run that 9 out of 10 chance it's going to come apart.
Always allow it to warm up above that freezing. Allow it to continue to warm up, and then check it to see if it's frozen or it's shorted.
All right. And if you have a dry battery, what is the life for storage?
Well, if it's sealed, like our motorcycle batteries, those have got the seal across the top of them that it's basically vacuum sealed. So they're pulling out all the air, and they're putting that strip of looks like foil across it. So it's keeping out any moisture from getting in there. So batteries like that, I mean, you can store them for years. And then once you activate them, when you pull that strip off and you put that acid in there, well, now you're bringing it to life. So as long as it's sealed and unopened, you're okay. You can store it as long as you want.
Yeah, I had a motorcycle battery that was that way, and it was amazing. It was the best way to go. But we still have a lot of people on here, so if you guys can stay on, we'll keep answering questions. What's the best way to clean up spilled battery acid if the battery overflows on the concrete?
Just wash it down the drain. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Just wipe it up with your sleeve.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, so baking soda and water is a really good neutralizer for sure. Now we do offer the neutralizing kits that you can actually, pour across it. And what it's doing is it's neutralizing it, but then you've got to clean it up properly. And what you want to do is scrape it all up, put it in a disposable bag, and send it back to your distributor to get rid of. Because we are contracted through to send stuff back to the smelter. So that way it's not making itself into the landfill. That's the worst thing that can happen. We don't want that. So neutralize it, clean it up, put it in a bag, send it back to your distributor.
Okay. Let's see, we've done some of the, can we get the charger that has equalizer option for charging?
Yes. Oh, there's tons of manufacturers out there that do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Dual Pro, Quick Charge has got it. Schumacher offers them. Associated. God, I could keep going. There's a bunch.
Yeah, it's typically a commercial type charger.
Yep.
Or some of the
you got some of the automotive ones that are actually calling it a destratification.
Yes, destratification and that equalization are very similar to the same thing.
All right. What cell voltage is 50% depth of discharge on a flooded deep cycle if new and charged voltage is 2.11 volts per cell?
So 2.11 is typically for your 100% state of charge. We call it 2.14. So a 50% state of charge of a battery is 12.4 volts. So that's a
battery that's sitting there unused. It doesn't have current going through it. It's not being charged or discharged. It's just sitting there minding its own business. And you take a voltmeter and check that voltage. If you're looking for something under a power load, typically, what is it, Jeff? About 11.9?
Yep, 11.9 would be your what we call the voltage disconnect.
Yeah, that's where you've got it under a load and you're bringing it down, disconnected or get to a point of disconnection and or recharging at 11.9 under load, under discharge load.
Yeah. So a fully charged battery, just so you guys are aware of, 12.84 volts is 100%. 12.01 is 100% discharged. So there's not a big variation in there.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys cut you guys loose. Y'all have hung out and asked a lot of questions, and Matt has asked plenty of questions too. I'm going to look him up as a future guest star on one of these. One more question from Matt. If flooded batteries lose too much water, dry or unserviced, how does that affect useful life? 50%, 25% loss of service life? Or are there too many variables to say?
There's just too many variables. So here's the thing, Matt. If it gets below the plates, so what's going to happen right away is you're going to start having sulfation. And what that sulfation does is go from positive to negative up to the strap. And you run that risk of, if you fill that thing back up, it's already created that short. So you could run that possibility of that rapid disassembly. So there's a lot of variables that come in between there, but if it's below the plates, never a good thing. If you see white crystals in there as you're looking down in it, please don't add water and please don't try to charge it. That battery is done.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. We've got a few more questions, but we're going to have to answer those offline. We appreciate everybody that hung out for so long here. And thank you for joining us. Again, after this is over, you're going to receive a survey. We would really appreciate if you'd fill it out. Gives us some good feedback. And like I mentioned, you can get some schematics and a PowerPoint or a PDF of this presentation. Jeff, Gale, thank you as always. You guys are fantastic battery nerds, and I mean wealths of knowledge. And
we've been called worse.
Yeah, we've been called a lot worse than battery nerds. Hey, we appreciate everybody's being on board with us and talking about and asking so many good questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.